A single drop of this water could save all of humanity, because once it comes into contact with blood, it can quickly split into 2 drops. A slight misstep and both would fill up. Unexpectedly, the researchers managed to freeze it in time, because if it wasn't stopped, it would drown everyone. This drop of water is lunar water, enough to save all of humanity. It turns out this is the year 2075 in the future. Due to the continuous decrease in global rainfall, water resources on Earth are gradually depleting. All the rivers in the world are almost completely dried up. Not only are fish dying in droves, but even crops are forced to reduce their yields. Fresh water naturally becomes the most precious resource for survival. Humanity frantically searches for water resources. Finally, they turn their attention to outer space. The Korean Aerospace Agency has also found a type of liquid on the moon. This lunar water is different from ordinary water because once it comes into contact with living things, it will multiply indefinitely. To help humans adapt to lunar water, scientists conducted secret experiments at the Balhae base on the moon. However, a sudden accident swept through the entire Balhae base, resulting in the deaths of all 17 elite scientists. Ultimately, the government was forced to abandon the research, but humanity's water crisis remained unresolved. 5 years after the failure of this experiment, the government established a tiered drinking water system to control water resources in the event of disaster. The higher a person's rank, the more clean water they received. This caused resentment among ordinary citizens who hoped for equitable distribution. However, a special group of people possessing gold cards received unlimited water supplies. Under pressure, the government once again took action on the moon, simultaneously planning to reopen the Balhae base, which had been closed for 5 years. Shortly afterward, the head of a department at the Korea Aerospace Agency suddenly approached Jeon. He sincerely invited her to participate in this moon mission, but she immediately refused. However, Chief Kim quickly gave her a reason she couldn't refuse. The destination was Balhae base. Jeon's older sister, Won Kyung, was the chief scientist at Balhae base. She died in an accident 5 years ago. Her sister's death haunted Jeon endlessly. To investigate the cause of her sister's death, she resolutely decided to participate in this mission. Before Won Kyung died, she sent Jeon a mysterious email, but the answer after deciphering it left Jeon extremely confused. It said to find Luna. Jeon understood that her sister's death was definitely related to it. To solve this series of mysteries, the moon exploration team quickly assembled. However, before they could depart, the command center unexpectedly changed the person chosen as co-pilot. This made Jeon even more worried. Before they set off, the director of the Korea Aerospace Agency informed everyone about the mission. They needed to go to the Balhae base, which had been permanently closed 5 years prior. Then, within 24 hours, they had to safely transport a sample of lunar water back to Earth. Director Choi stated that the reason all the researchers at Balhae base died was due to a radioactive leak. Immediately afterward, everyone prepared to depart. The Nuri 11 spacecraft slowly docked with the rocket. After completing the docking, the rocket engine began to burn. After a few seconds of countdown, the immense thrust propelled the rocket into the sky. Soon after, the rocket hurtled towards the lunar airspace. Unexpectedly, a mishap occurred. A dense area of meteoroids appeared in front of the spacecraft. The spacecraft shook violently, causing the landing capsule's fixing equipment to become extremely unstable. Reluctantly, they had no choice but to detach from the rocket and fly to the moon on their own. Finally, the spacecraft crashed violently onto the lunar surface. The capsule became stuck on the edge of a ravine and rocked violently. Seeing the capsule's windows shatter, Captain Yun Jae ordered everyone to eject. Fortunately, the spacecraft only fell into the abyss after everyone had landed. Unfortunately, all the communication equipment fell to the bottom of the ravine along with the spacecraft. Their only hope was that the space agency would soon realize the problem and send rescuers. But luckily, they could still reach the base for shelter and to carry out their mission. At this point, they were 7 kilometers from Balhae base. Completing the mission within the short span of 24 hours was almost impossible. Then, everyone headed towards Balhae base. But after only a few steps, Soo-hyuk, the only one in the team familiar with the base, suddenly felt unwell. It turned out that he had accidentally broken a rib in the landing accident. Because the medical equipment had fallen down the cliff along with the ship, he quickly died from lack of oxygen. But this was certainly a heavy blow to the entire team, because he was the leader of this mission. He even participated in the construction of the base. He was the only one in the team familiar with the terrain here. But the situation at hand didn't allow them to continue wallowing in grief. Because everyone's oxygen was running low, they had to reach Balhae base for resupply in the shortest time possible. Fortunately, they successfully reached Balhae base at the last second before running out of oxygen. After everyone replenished their energy, Yoon Jae immediately changed the internal environment system of the base to Earth-like gravity. This allowed them to move freely, as on Earth. Then, Yoonjae didn't stop but went straight to the command center. But they quickly noticed something unusual, because in the corner of the corridor was a drowned corpse. Judging by his clothes, he was probably a mercenary from the ZX International Corporation, but he was a Korean researcher. Why was he here, and why did he drown on the moon? A moment later, everyone started whispering and speculating, but this was just speculation. Yoonjae decided to record the incident for later investigation. Then he led everyone forward. But at this point, an even stranger scene appeared. The team had clearly gone deep inside the Balhae base, yet they hadn't detected any signs of radiation. Everyone recalled Director Choi's earlier statement that the deaths of 17 researchers 5 years ago were due to radiation at the Balhae base. But the body they had just seen clearly had bubbles of mucus. This was enough to conclude that he drowned, not due to radiation. But how could there be enough water in this arid moon base to drown a person? Clearly, the information provided by Director Choi was completely untrue. But why would she lie? This made Jian suspicious. She was certain there was another hidden reason behind her sister's death. Therefore, she suggested performing an autopsy to investigate the truth. Once the results were available, they would decide whether to proceed. However, Jian's suggestion was not accepted by Yoonjae because they had to race against time. Finally, the team arrived safely at the control center. Then the team leader restarted the base's power. In an instant, oxygen and all the lighting functions in the base were turned on. However, the worst part was that the communication equipment in the base still couldn't contact the main headquarters. Next, everyone removed their heavy helmets. After resting and reorganizing, they resumed their mission to search for the lunar water sample. Yoonjae arranged for everyone to split up and act separately. They split into 3 groups to search different storage rooms for lunar water samples. The first group, led by Yoonjae, went to storage room number 1. The second group, led by Tae Selk, went to storage room number 2. The third group, led by Soo Hyuk, went to storage room number 3 with Jian and Jisoo. Jian deliberately followed behind. At the same time, she suddenly noticed a strange corridor. It turned out that before setting foot on the moon, she had learned from the late Deputy Chief Wang that the Luna her sister had mentioned in the letter was actually the Balhae base's database. This database was located at the end of the corridor. But at that moment, Jisoo noticed something unusual about herself, so she reluctantly put aside her investigation and continued with her mission. At the same time, the other 2 groups also opened the doors of their respective storage rooms, but the sight before them immediately horrified everyone. Inside, the entire room was filled with the corpses of Balhae base personnel from 5 years ago. As expected, everyone had drowned. The scratches on the walls indicated a fierce struggle before their deaths. However, in the pre-departure meeting, the aerospace agency had clearly told them that these people had died from the missile before the base was sealed off. But given the current situation, the deliberate concealment by the South Korean Aerospace Agency had aroused suspicion among everyone. The matter was becoming increasingly perplexing. Soon after, Jian suggested halting the mission, but Yoonjae refused. With no other option, everyone could continue the mission. But when some went deeper into the containment chamber, they discovered there was nothing there. Although a few samples were scattered on the floor, none were intact. Even more regrettable was the similar situation of the second group. Their only hope now lay with the third group. Just as Jian and the other 2 were about to open containment chamber number 3, Jisoo suddenly detected an unusual signal. To avoid danger, Soo Hyuk and Jian decided to split up to investigate the source of the abnormal signal. Jisoo stayed behind to wait, but as soon as the 2 left, Jisoo suddenly flashed a sinister smile and entered the storage room alone. After removing his personal recording device, he began searching for samples in the room. However, he was quickly disappointed because the situation here was the same as the other 2 storage rooms. Not a single sample was intact. At that moment, however, he accidentally dropped his flashlight and inadvertently found a complete sample on the floor. He excitedly picked it up, but he didn't realize that all his actions had been observed by some terrifying entity for a long time. At the same time, the 2 on the other side finally eliminated the abnormal signal. They discovered it was just a system error. Then, both prepared to return to the storage room. But just as Jian reached the door, she ran into Jisoo, who was about to leave. She saw a smug expression on his face, as if he had succeeded in his scheme. But then, something terrifying pulled him back. Seeing this, Jian hurriedly followed him inside, only to find Jisoo hanging from the ceiling, then falling heavily to the ground unconscious. The specimen in his hand had also been taken by that terrifying unidentified creature. Although Jian was terrified, she cautiously approached Jisoo's body. Unexpectedly, she saw a strange dark figure. Just as she was about to continue her investigation, Soo Hyuk returned. Seeing Jisoo lying unconscious on the ground and Jian looking distraught beside him, he couldn't help but suspect her of causing this. Fortunately, thanks to the diagnosis of Dr. Ga Young and Jian's personal recording device, she was cleared of all charges. changes. After the diagnosis, Ga-young discovered that Jisoo's entire body was shattered, as if he had just fallen from the 5th floor. Such serious injuries clearly couldn't have been caused by falling from the ceiling. They were most likely related to the strange creature Jian had seen. Next, Ga-young, using her personal voice recorder, deduced the creature's escape route, the ventilation duct covered by the tilted shell. The three were about to enter to investigate when a cry for help suddenly rang out over the radio. They rushed back to the control center. It turned out to be Su Chan from Team 2. He was constantly spitting out water. After searching the storage room, they returned to the control center. But as soon as Su Chan arrived, he sat motionless like a log in his chair, not saying a word. Kim Sun thought Su Chan was just tired, so he jokingly patted him on the shoulder. Unexpectedly, the next second, Su Chan started vomiting uncontrollably. In this emergency, Kim Sun urgently called for help from Yoon-jae and Ga-young. Ga-young suspected that Su Chan had been infected with some kind of virus. She instructed them to quickly put on their protective gear. Her team would handle the situation after returning from storage room number 1. As time passed, Su Chan's consciousness began to fade. Fortunately, Ga-young arrived immediately and began resuscitation. A large stream of water continuously gushed from the breathing tube. This horrific scene astonished even the 30-year-old doctor. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation. Just then, Yoon-jae and the other two arrived. Seeing this, Soo-hyuk immediately collapsed to the ground. He never imagined that this mission would be the last time he would see his younger brother, Su-chan. Although his heart ached terribly, the only thing he could do was accept it all. All of this happened just 5 hours after landing on the moon. The consecutive deaths of Jisoo and Su-chan finally made Yoon-jae realize the seriousness of the situation. Therefore, he agreed to the request for an autopsy and arranged for others to assist. The remaining members split into 2 groups. Tae-suk and Kim Sun stayed at the command center to repair the communication equipment. Yoon-jae led Soo-hyuk and E2 into the ventilation duct to search for the strange creature. Fortunately, shortly after entering the duct, the 3 detected the creature's signal. It was heading towards them. Seeing this, the 3 immediately assumed a fighting stance. Unexpectedly, the creature was only on the upper part of the duct. Although separated by a layer, the 3 did not give up on capturing it. However, they ultimately let the creature escape because the only path the team had to take was blocked by a gate. Behind the gate was a level 1 management area that they did not yet have access to. Reluctantly, they had to temporarily abandon the pursuit. Just then, the good news from Tae-suk came through the walkie-talkie. It turned out they had found the cause of the base's communication failure. So Yoon-jae and the others hurried back to the control center. Tae-suk speculated that the data processor connecting to the communication system was malfunctioning. However, it was located in the center of the base's wiring system and required manual repair. But the elevator on the wiring system had been unused for a long time and was no longer operational. This made the repair work extremely dangerous. After some hesitation, Yoon-jae decided to personally take on the task. He immediately went outside the base, but the desolate moonlight reflected a glimmer of hope in his eyes. It turned out that the water shortage was due to a lack of water resources. Even after artificial treatment, the water was still harmful to drink. Unfortunately, Yoon-jae's daughter had also become a victim of this disaster. The only way to prevent his daughter's illness was to have a purer water source. Before heading to the moon, Yoon-jae was promised by the aerospace agency that if he completed this mission, they would give him a gold card, granting him unlimited water use. Although the abyss below was bottomless, he was determined to complete the mission for the sake of his daughter. He then secured the final rope after fastening his safety harness. He began to slowly descend, but at that moment, the metal frame suddenly shook. It turned out the malfunctioning elevator was automatically activating. Fortunately, Yoon-jae managed to grab the handrail next to him in time to avoid the impact. However, the danger wasn't over yet. Due to the elevator losing control and colliding, it veered off the tracks and was about to fall. Luckily, at that moment, Yoon-jae suddenly had an idea. He told Soo-hyuk to release the other end of the securing rope. Finally, just before the elevator hit him, he managed to hook the safety lock onto the handrail, thus escaping death. However, the rapid fall still caused him to lose his balance. After the violent collisions and shaking, Yoon-jae survived but was covered in injuries. He still tried his best to repair the data connector before collapsing to the ground. When Yoon-jae woke up, he found himself inside the base. It turned out he had been rescued by Soo-hyuk and E2. Unfortunately, despite Yoon-jae risking his life to repair the data connector, the communication system was still not restored. Just then, the system suddenly detected a signal from outside, located in storage room number 3. So Yoon-jae led the team there immediately, but they didn't expect that this strange signal was coming from Jisoo's body. After searching for a while, Yoon-jae found a satellite phone on Jisoo's person. It turned out Jisoo's true identity was a spy. Since entering entering the base, he had been continuously reporting on the situation and collecting samples to the outside world. The abnormal signal that the third team detected before entering the containment chamber was also intentionally created by him. His purpose was to monopolize and steal the sample, but Jisoo didn't expect that a strange creature would appear along the way to stop him. That's how he lost his life. Afterwards, Yoonjae gave the phone to Tae-suk, hoping to use it to contact Earth. Next, the team returned to the control center, but strangely, Tae-suk not only disassembled the phone into pieces, but also looked at Yoonjae meaningfully. Just then, Kim-sun checked the communication equipment and accidentally discovered that the communication system had been restored to normal. This was undoubtedly the most effective reassurance for them, because it meant the team could contact the aerospace agency and leave this dangerous place soon. Then, to everyone's anticipation, Yoonjae successfully contacted Director Choi. Next, he reported a series of strange occurrences and questioned Director Choi about Jisoo being a spy, as changing pilots required her approval. However, she bluntly stated that she would accept the inspector's investigation later. What worried Yoonjae even more was his uncertainty about whether there were any spies among the current members. Director Choi, however, didn't seem concerned. Instead, she ordered Yoonjae to shift the focus of his work to capturing the unidentified creature that stole the samples. According to her, preventing the samples from leaking out was more important than recovering them. Yoonjae then speculated that the so-called unidentified creature might be survivors inside the base, as they were extremely familiar with the base's internal structure. But Director Choi immediately dismissed this jokingly. However, this only fueled Yoonjae's suspicion, as her demeanor suggested she had known about this for a long time. She was always hiding a secret. But how could someone who could sit in the position of Director Choi be an ordinary person? With just 3 sentences, she had calmed Yoonjae down. He absolutely had to complete the mission, because it could not only save his daughter, but also everyone else. Afterward, the team was given the code to open the Level 1 control zone. They followed Director Choi's instructions to continue pursuing the strange creature that had stolen the sample. But at this moment, Jian rushed into the control center in a panic and asked Yoonjae a haunting question. Was it water? Was the sample they had to recover water? Faced with everyone's suspicion, Yoonjae hesitated for a moment, but finally revealed the truth. It turned out that in this era, due to the near depletion of Earth's resources, nations had extended their greedy claws into the vast universe. But the moon was too barren to be of interest to the superpowers. This gave the Korea Aerospace Agency an opportunity to explore. But they never expected that researchers would discover an extraordinary water resource and call it lunar water. South Korea's all-out effort in building the Balhae base was to research lunar water, because once successful, it could solve the water resource crisis for all of humanity. Such crucial information, if leaked, would certainly be fought over by various forces. Therefore, it was always kept secret. But Jian didn't think so, because she discovered the secret of the lunar water sample. This was the truth behind the base accident 5 years ago and the death of member Su Chan. It turned out that Jian discovered that Su Chan and the others who died at the base 5 years ago all died from drowning, so she took blood samples from them and compared them to Su Chan's blood. The results showed that all of them were very healthy and showed no signs of infection. But strangely, Su Chan's blood contained an additional layer of clear liquid. Although the test results showed it was just ordinary distilled water, Jian's intuition told her that things were absolutely not that simple. So she pricked her finger and dropped a drop of blood onto the water. The result was the terrifying scene that appeared at the beginning of the video. The blood quickly froze the water. It turned out that this type of water, once in contact with blood, would multiply indefinitely until the host died. Therefore, Jian speculated that Su Chan had probably accidentally contracted lunar water somewhere, which is why he kept spitting water out. From this, she deduced that the base bombing 5 years ago was likely a tragedy caused by improper handling of lunar water. This also explains why there was no radiation leak inside the base, as the aerospace agency claimed. But strangely, there were no survivors in this bombing. Most of the dead were found in a locked storage room. Perhaps there was something hidden behind it all. At this point, the members who knew the truth began to consider withdrawing from the mission. Although the unlimited water supply was tempting, it was clearly insignificant compared to death. Meanwhile, at this crucial moment, Yoonjae chose not to maintain the overall situation, but secretly went with Jian to a place marked with a triangle. They then removed their personal recording devices. Using the newly acquired Level 1 code, they bypassed the aerospace agency's ban and successfully opened the large door. A long row of neatly arranged disks appeared before them, completely undisguised. It turned out to be the Balhae base's database. Jian had previously tried to sneak here for a blood test, but was stopped at the door. Only after learning that Yoonjae possessed the Level 1 code did she convince him to come with her to uncover the truth about the Balhae base. However, just 2 steps into the tunnel, Yoon-jae noticed something unusual. He accidentally stepped on a raised floorboard. Strangely, a green tree was hidden beneath it. After searching for a while, he found a switch and tried turning it. Unexpectedly, it opened the raised floorboard. But even more surprisingly, the tunnel wasn't just filled with green trees. It seemed to conceal a secret space not marked on the map. For safety, Yoon-jae regrouped the team. This time, Soo-hyuk and Yoon-jae went ahead to explore. Soo-hyuk then took out a pink light-emitting stick and threw it down the tunnel. This allowed them to determine the tunnel's depth. As soon as they landed, they immediately began exploring. They were astonished to discover that beneath the tunnel lay not only a vast space, but also many tall, rare green trees, seldom seen even on Earth. However, they quickly found the answer. After receiving a safety confirmation signal from Soo-hyuk, Yoon-jae led his team into the underground space. However, what surprised everyone was that deep within this underground space lay a room containing perfectly preserved specimens. The plants there had all grown from shattered specimens on the surface, revealing the immense energy contained within the water samples. Everyone was incredibly excited, not only because they could complete their mission, but also because they saw hope in resolving the water resource crisis. Next, the team began urgently collecting the specimens. But just as they were filling the containers, a strange noise suddenly echoed. Yoon-jae went to investigate, only to find E1's arm broken on the spot. Without timely medical attention, he died quickly. The culprit was the strange creature in room number 3. It clutched the specimen it had stolen from E1 and cornered Kim-sun against the wall, but he refused to sit idly by and wait to die. Seizing the opportunity when the opponent was distracted, he grabbed a nearby pistol and shot the monster. The intense pain caused the monster to drop the specimen and frantically flee. Yoon-jae immediately led the team forward. However, due to the monster's speed, they were unable to inflict effective damage. Only when it hid in the green trees did the team stop shooting. However, they did not give up the pursuit and slowly approached its hiding place. But what everyone didn't expect was that the so-called monster was just a delicate-looking little girl. After a brief exchange of glances, the girl slipped past everyone and quickly escaped from the underground storage room. Seeing this, everyone intended to chase after her. But at this moment, Jian noticed that the specimen that had fallen to the ground was leaking fluid and, having come into contact with the blood of E1's team members, was beginning to multiply rapidly. Yoon-jae understood the danger posed by the lunar water specimen, so he immediately organized a retreat. Tae-seok managed to return in time to retrieve the container holding the specimen. However, the battle had destroyed the life support system of the storage room, damaging all the specimens inside. This meant the specimen in the container was their last hope of completing the mission. Ultimately, the battle resulted in the death of Team E1 and serious injuries to Team E2. He suffered 18 broken ribs from a minor collision with a fleeing girl and required immediate surgery. Although they lacked blood of the same type for transfusion, fortunately, Tae-seok volunteered to donate blood, allowing the surgery to proceed. However, due to the severity of his injuries, despite a successful surgery, Team E2 remained in a coma. Afterwards, Yoon-jae reported the successful retrieval of the specimen to Chief Choi. He had expected her to happily send reinforcements. Unexpectedly, she used the excuse of a leaked sample and demanded that the entire team kill the girl to complete their mission. Reluctantly, he could only continue leading the team into the ventilation shaft to pursue the girl. Tae-seok remained in the medical room to care for the unconscious E2. Ji-an and Ga-young went to the base's database to uncover the truth about lunar water. Only by understanding everything about lunar water could they have a chance to survive and return to Earth. Unfortunately, Ji-an discovered that all the data had been erased. Helpless, they returned to the medical room. But strangely, they discovered that Tae-seok had taken the sample out of the refrigerator. Although he explained it was Yoon-jae's order, Ji-an remained suspicious because she hadn't received any notification about the sample transfer on her walkie-talkie. While they were arguing, Tae-seok suddenly noticed the monster girl had arrived outside the door. Seeing this, the three immediately assumed a defensive stance and signaled Yoon-jae to return. But the girl was unusually agile. She not only dodged all the bullets, but also counterattacked Tae-seok. However, she quickly fell silent again. At this moment, Ji-an seemed to have discovered something. She quickly picked up the specimen from the ground and began to soothe the girl's emotions. Then, Ji-an told Yoon-jae and the others who had just returned not to act rashly. After that, Ji-an slowly placed the specimen in front of the girl. A miraculous scene occurred. The girl's eyes suddenly became friendly. This further confirmed Ji-an's judgment. Next, at Ji-an's command, the girl slowly approached the specimen. But as soon as she took it, Tae-seok accurately shot her. Lunar water spilled out and hit her. The next second, she fell to the ground, convulsing in excruciating pain. But just when everyone thought the little girl would drown, her face suddenly transformed into a fish-like shape. Then the wounds on her body began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. It seemed that lunar water was not only not deadly to her, but on the contrary, it was an excellent tonic. Next, she looked at Jian meaningfully and then hid in the ventilation shaft. Seeing this, everyone gave up. Afterwards, Jian put the sample in the refrigerator and discussed the strange phenomenon of lunar water on the little girl with everyone. Jian speculated that the girl's body had probably undergone some kind of mutation and adapted to lunar water. This could very well be the key to solving the problem of human adaptation to lunar water. Therefore, they had to capture her. Yunjae also understood the advantages and disadvantages, so he told the team to discuss a method of capture. Jian stood in the tunnel with the sample in hand. After several encounters with the girl, Jian discovered that she only appeared in places where the specimens were located. She was only interested in stealing the specimens and wouldn't easily attack other targets. Therefore, they decided to use the specimens to lure her out. The result was exactly as Jian predicted. Soon, the girl broke through the wall and emerged from the ventilation duct. Jian then placed the specimens on the ground, but just as she was about to touch them, Soo-hyuk slammed the gate shut behind her. Jian, who should have immediately fled, was moved by the girl's pitiful expression. Seeing this, Yunjae pulled Jian aside and closed the door, isolating her. Despite her best efforts to escape, the girl was a step too slow, and her foot got trapped, causing her intense pain. Jian, seeing this, hugged the girl, wanting to comfort her, but Jian was bitten hard by the little girl and pushed to the ground. However, Jian felt no pain. Instead, she fell into deep thought. She noticed the words Luna 073 on the girl's neck. At that moment, Yunjae fired a tranquilizer dart from his gun, and the girl gradually fell silent. Seeing this, Jian opened the gate and hugged the girl like a mother. Strangely, the girl responded naturally. For a moment, the scene became warm again. At this point, Soo-hyuk was about to handcuff the girl, but Yunjae stopped him. Then he picked her up like an old father. But just as they were about to return to their original path, the alarm suddenly sounded, instantly jolting the terrified girl back to her senses. She struggled free from Yunjae's embrace and hid in the ventilation shaft. Seeing this, Jian picked up the sample from the ground, despite her teammates' attempts to stop her. Before the gate slammed shut, she rushed out and crawled into the ventilation shaft. She suspected the girl's identity was connected to her older sister. Earlier in the infirmary, she had noticed her sister's name tag on the girl's clothes. Now, Jian discovered the name Luna on the back of the girl's neck. This was exactly what her sister had asked her to find in her letter. Jian believed that everything was absolutely not just a coincidence, but the structure of the ventilation shaft was too similar. Plus, the fall earlier had damaged the communication map, causing Jian to quickly get lost. Fortunately, at that moment, Jian spotted the girl's figure and immediately chased after her. However, the more she chased, the more suspicious she became, because with the girl's speed, she couldn't possibly catch up. But Jian quickly found the answer. It turned out the girl had been waiting for her. Jian followed the girl and eventually discovered a secret room. Inside, there were all sorts of papers and documents scattered everywhere, making it look like a small research lab. At that moment, a sudden sound came from behind. Jian followed the sound and opened the hatch, discovering it was the little girl's living quarters. Next, Jian found a data disk on the bed. The little girl's secret was finally revealed. It turned out that Jian's older sister had accidentally discovered a species of fish that could perfectly adapt to the reproductive effects of lunar water. Therefore, they began experimenting on humans through gene recombination and cell fusion until the experiments on Luna 037 and the current monster girl showed some improvement. The reason they looked exactly alike was because the Korean Aerospace Agency had used cloning technology that was banned worldwide. This was also the reason why the high-ranking officials of the Aerospace Agency deliberately concealed the accident, because once it was revealed, all the experimental results would be completely destroyed. Knowing all this, Jian couldn't hold back her tears. It turned out that her older sister's constant indifference towards her was to complete such a great undertaking. She immediately decided she had to protect the little girl to solve humanity's water resource crisis and restore the Earth's former verdant green. Next, Jian injected the lunar water sample she brought into the little girl's body. The wound on her leg, caught in the gate, healed instantly. But at that moment, Soo-hyuk suddenly ran up. Without a word, he raised his gun and aimed it at the little girl. It turned out that after the gate closed during the encirclement, Yunjae and Soo-hyuk had entered the ventilation shaft together. They immediately split up. Soo-hyuk was responsible for searching for Jian, who was chasing the little girl, while Yunjae returned to the control center to investigate the reason for the sudden closure. Later, on the way, Yunjae accidentally encountered Ga-young, who was extremely frightened. It turned out that both of them had inadvertently stumbled into the storage facility containing containing the failed human body samples from the lunar water experiment. Next, Ga-young reported that she had found E2 dead in the refrigerator. Then, the two proceeded to the control center. Tragically, they discovered that member Kim's son had been brutally murdered. The mastermind behind all this was Tae-seok. It turned out that Yoon-jae's fears were correct. There were always two spies in the team. After Jisoo's death, Tae-seok took over the mission. Previously, when Yoon-jae was repairing the data connector outside the base, the old elevator suddenly started automatically. This was also intentionally caused by Tae-seok. Fortunately, Yoon-jae calmly handled the danger and escaped unharmed. Afterward, Tae-seok deliberately obstructed the team's communication with Earth. That's why he removed the satellite phone that Yoon-jae found on Jisoo. He actually had a backup satellite phone himself. But in the end, Tae-seok miscalculated. He didn't expect Kim Sun's unintentional actions to have repaired the communication system. Thanks to this, Yoon-jae was able to contact the aerospace agency. Later, the team accidentally discovered the underground storage room and successfully retrieved the sample. However, he used the excuse of donating blood to stay alone in the medical room, thereby contacting the GX Corporation outside. The Dauphin instructed him to eliminate everyone who knew about it and bring the sample to the meeting point. But just as he was about to steal the sample, Jian and Ga-young returned from the Bana database after finding nothing. Seeing that Tae-seok was about to be exposed, he decided to kill them to silence them. Coincidentally, at this moment, they encountered Luna 073, who had come to steal the sample. After witnessing the girl's abilities, he disregarded the objections of the GX Corporation and insisted on taking both the girl and the sample back with him. But Tae-seok didn't know that E2 had actually woken up a long time ago. His conversation with the GX Corporation was also clearly overheard. After Tae-seok left the E2 medical room with the sample, he immediately stood up to find his communication device and prepared to report the incident to Yoon-jae. But as soon as he opened the compartment door, he encountered Tae-seok returning. Ultimately, he died under the enemy's gunfire. To avoid revealing his spy identity prematurely, Tae-seok hid E2's body in the refrigerator. It wasn't until Ga-young completed her capture mission and returned ahead of schedule that she discovered it. By then, Tae-seok had reached the control center. Through the control panel, he clearly observed the positions of the other members. Therefore, he closed the gates in the area, preparing to isolate them before eliminating them one by one. However, because Kim Sun also returned ahead of schedule, he was only on the edge of the blockade. After breaking through a blockade, he entered the free zone. He then went to the control center to investigate the reason for the gate closure. Unbeknownst to him, Tae-seok had been lying in ambush there for some time. Before Kim Sun could even inform Yoon-jae, his communication device was stolen and he was brutally murdered. Afterward, Tae-seok activated the base's ventilation system. He would cause a catastrophic disaster within 20 minutes. Next, Tae-seok discovered on the Luna 073 control panel that Juan and Soo-hyuk were in a secret room. Therefore, he immediately set off to capture the girl and deliver the sample to the GX Corporation. But when Tae-seok arrived at the room, he found she had long since disappeared. He could only return empty-handed. However, as soon as Tae-seok left the compartment, he encountered Yoon-jae. It turned out that after discovering Kim Sun's tragic death at the base, Yoon-jae had deduced that Tae-seok was the spy because, besides Tae-seok, the other members always followed him on missions, leaving no room for the crime. Therefore, after lifting the lockdown, Yoon-jae searched for Tae-seok's whereabouts on the map. He discovered Tae-seok approaching Soo-hyuk, Jian, and Luna in the secret room. Therefore, he immediately instructed the three to retreat and rejoin Ga-young, who was on her way to the infirmary. Yoon-jae, meanwhile, went alone to intercept Tae-seok. The two eventually met outside the secret room, and a life-or-death battle ensued. Although Yoon-jae was initially at a disadvantage, his ability to become a team leader meant he was certainly not ordinary. In just a few rounds, he subdued Tae-seok, then posed a haunting question. At that moment, the satellite phone on the floor suddenly received a message, drawing Yoon-jae's attention. Seeing this, Tae-seok seized the opportunity to break free from his restraints, picked up his pistol, and once again confronted Yoon-jae. But at that instant, countless drops of water suddenly dripped from the ceiling above Tae-seok's head. He couldn't dodge in time, and his gun got wet. These drops were lunar water. The culprit was Tae-seok. It turned out that the underground storage room where lunar water had been kept had malfunctioned due to the fierce battle with Luna. All the lunar water samples had leaked. These lunar water samples had originally accumulated in the underground storage room, but Tae-seok, in order to eliminate the remaining members of the team, forcibly opened the ventilation system. This caused lunar water from the underground storage room to spill through the ventilation pipes throughout the base. Tae-seok ultimately suffered the consequences and was also infected with lunar water. But even in this final moment, he did not give up his mission. He hastily took the sample container and left. Yoon-jae did not chase after Tae-seok, but immediately returned returned to the medical room. Although he did not yet know that the falling drops were lunar water, this unusual situation made him extremely uneasy. Therefore, he decided to organize the team to withdraw from the moon. But at that moment, Jian suddenly became disoriented, then staggered and locked herself in the isolation chamber. It turned out that earlier, when Jian and Yunjae rushed to the infirmary as instructed, a drop of water falling from the ceiling accidentally hit her. Only now, when her body showed signs of abnormality, did she realize it was lunar water. Soon, she began to vomit water uncontrollably and quickly fainted on the ground. But strangely, Jian quickly regained consciousness in the hospital bed. Guiyang speculated that when Jian was bitten by Luna's mutated gene also entered her body. Therefore, it produced antibodies that allowed Jian to inhibit the proliferation of lunar water. Jian escaped death. She looked at the poor Luna in front of her. Her resolve to protect the little girl grew stronger. At the same time, Jian became even more certain that Luna was the key to saving all of humanity. Meanwhile, Suhuk checked Taesuk's dropped phone and discovered that GX Corporation's reinforcements were on their way to the base and had arranged to meet Taesuk at Gate 7. To deal with this emergency, Yunjae immediately reported the incident to Chief Kim. Because of Director Choi's numerous actions, Yunjae had lost faith in her. Chief Kim then announced that Director Choi, after learning that the team had obtained the sample, had dispatched reinforcements. However, around that time, they discovered another spacecraft had also entered orbit near the moon. This was very likely a GX Corporation spacecraft. Chief Kim then said he would find a way to delay GX Corporation's arrival to give the team time to recover the sample. At this moment, Jian, having just woken up, rushed over and joined everyone in a heated discussion about arranging things for Luna after her return to Earth. Because once Luna returned to Earth, she would certainly be immediately taken to research facilities. The little girl will spend her entire life as a research instrument for lunar water at the South Korean Space Agency. But lunar water is currently uncontrollable by humans. Once it gets out of control, the consequences will be unimaginable. Jian absolutely cannot accept that such a great miracle is being monopolized by the South Korean government. Therefore, their only option now is to conduct research in the International Space Research Area. Only by researching in the most neutral area can they ensure that she receives the fairest and most just treatment. At the same time, they can effectively prevent anyone from monopolizing lunar water. After discussing their strategy, the team began heading towards Gate 7 under Jian's guidance. But she suddenly lay down on the ground, frowning as if she had discovered something terrible. It turned out that lunar water in the ventilation ducts had begun seeping into the base in large quantities. Through Jian's infection with lunar water, the entire team learned that the sudden appearance of water in the base was lunar water. Then, under Luna's guidance, everyone began to flee frantically. After a strenuous effort, they finally reached Gate 7. Yunjae closed the gate, hoping to temporarily contain the lunar water. However, upon entering, they discovered Taesuk had lost consciousness, though he was still muttering incoherently. It turned out that after the accident at Balhae Base 5 years prior, the space agency had dispatched rescue teams, and Taesuk was one of them. But the order they received wasn't to rescue the researchers, but to keep them near the front room, causing everyone to be infected with lunar water and die. All of this was because the high-ranking officials of the space agency feared the secrets of the cloning research at the base would be revealed. This ultimately became a haunting obsession and a crucial trigger for his betrayal of the Korean Space Agency. At that moment, lunar water surged outside the gate, and the immense water pressure cracked the glass. Seeing this, Suhyuk decisively fired multiple shots, hitting Taesuk repeatedly. However, he himself was also hit by Taesuk. Afterwards, the team retrieved the sample and entered the airtight capsule, beginning to put on their spacesuits and other equipment. But by this time, Suhyuk could no longer hold on and finally collapsed on the way home. Next, Yunjae discovered that the capsule door was broken and couldn't be completely closed. They could only close it manually from the outside. Although he still deeply regretted leaving this world, he ultimately decided to sacrifice himself. He went outside alone to close the door and say his final goodbyes to Jian. Yunjae was quickly submerged by lunar water. Jian, knowing that Yunjae's time was limited, immediately turned to prepare to retreat. But at this moment, Jian realized that Luna had already left the exit. Seeing this, Jian quickly grabbed the sample and, along with Guiyang, chased after Luna. But as soon as they exited the capsule, they discovered Luna's spacesuits strangely scattered on the ground. However, before they could even think clearly, lunar water surged out and blew them away. Fortunately, the temperature on the moon was very cold, so the lunar water froze instantly upon leaving the base, posing no risk of spreading. Afterward, they began searching for Luna. Luckily, she was only curious about the unfamiliar environment and hadn't gone far. She could even move freely in space without her spacesuit. Most thankfully, the chemist Yunjae wasn't dead. He was rescued by Luna and only suffered minor injuries. At that moment, a blinding light suddenly shone down from above, accompanied by strong winds. The rescue team from the Korean Aerospace Agency had arrived just in time. The film ends here. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel to support us. Goodbye, and see you again.